Astra Travelers, and welcome to another episode of Tales of Teyvat, a Genshin Lore Podcast. Last week, we talked all about Heizo, our second favorite detective in all of Teyvat. And this week, we'll be discovering the Pari and talking all about Pari Land over in the Vourukasha Oasis.
Are you looking to drum up some excitement for your senses? Fly yourself on over to our site. It's talesofteyvat.com, where each episode offers up its own plume of purifying light, aka pictures and videos, to help cleanse your eye orbs with dazzling purity.
While you're on our site, check out our past episodes and seasons, artist spotlights from the community for every topic, and some other goodies.
Finally, feel free to email us at talesofteyvatpod@gmail.com to let us know what you think of this week's episode and what topics you'd like to see in the future. Additionally, please feel free to give us a rating on whatever your podcast listening platform is to let other travelers know that they can find some fun lore, hopefully, going on over here. But before we jump into the quote-unquote fun lore, or you could call it a pool of lore, so to say.
Ooh.
There is some dusty lore that we need to kind of brush off real quick before we hop into it. Things that we've definitely talked about in some past episodes and things that you've probably heard us talk about or seen mentioned. So we want to start off with the locations that are going to be really important for this, because if you read through the lore quickly, you might assume that everything we're going to talk about takes place in one of these two places, but they're different. You should really, if you're going to go to one, don't want to use like the same waypoint type of thing. It's going to take you forever to get from one to the other. So the first one is the Tunigi Hollow. When you go into the Girdle of the Sands, you have really the left side and the right side. So on the left, your main focal point and area of interest is Tunigi Hollow. That is like your spiral with the cool crystal things coming up out of it. That's where you can find our little dendro lion that we've been like, ooh, was this like the king of the forest? You know? So that's area number one. And now if you go more to the right, you have a really pretty green area if you're looking at your map with some water. And that is the Vourukasha Oasis. That is the land of the Pari. There's a giant tree coming out of the ground. The first time you see it, you're kind of like, what the fuck is going on? I'm confused.
There's flowers everywhere.
Yes, there's the sea of flowers, which I have a lot of questions about that. And that's where you can find the Pari for the most part. Initially, you can find one, maybe two Pari over in Tunigi Hollow, but the Oasis is really where you're going to find your Pari. So those are the two locations.
Yeah, I think it's great that you said that it'll take you forever if you actually went from side to side, because if you look at it, you're like, oh, that's not that bad. It's right there. Like, what's the problem? But those mountains are high.
There's a giant mountain range there.
Yeah, it is difficult to get across that thing.
I think it's higher than the Adirondacks.
No.
Yeah, I've never hiked them, even though I'm kind of close to them, because everyone thinks I live in upstate New York and I don't.
Well, I mean, the Adirondacks go through Jersey too, so.
Oh, perfect.
It goes all the way down.
Okay, so maybe this isn't as wide spanning as the Adirondacks, but you get the idea. It's like a wall. It's like the Great Wall of China made out of mountain range and sand.
Yes, definitely the size of the Great Wall of China.
Yeah, sure. Why not, right? The tree is taller than this barrier, which bears a lot of questions about this tree, man. Good thing it's made of magic, basically. We'll get into that.
I'm made of magic too, so you know.
Are you, Tiff? Are you made of practical magic?
Yeah, at this time of the year, yes, I am.
At this time of the year, absolutely. Next month, ask me about Christmas magic.
Yes.
Holiday miracles. But those are our two places.
In between, with that giant mountain range too, an interesting point that kind of comes up in this is that when you do later on find the door to Khaenri'ahn, it's in between these places. So, which makes sense.
Yeah, definitely makes sense.
And something else just to throw out there about the geography. We've never talked geography this much. Is also the location of the Amrita pool, which we're going to talk about how that forms and what that's all about. But like when you read the lore, you feel like the Amrita pool should be like in the middle of the Oasis, and it's not. It's like off in a cave to like off to the side. Like it's kind of strange when you hear the lore, and it makes me wonder like how much of this geography has also changed. Like was this mountain range always there? That type of thing. Because like apparently a bird dove into this pool. I don't see any, I mean, I guess there's a cave. I guess there is a cave, like a skylight cave, a cave skylight. I don't know, like but I don't know. That's like you gotta have good aim as a bird. Big bird, so not to be confused with the big bird, but bigger than Big Bird.
If only.
If only imagine if Big Bird was in this game.
Simurgh is Big Bird. I mean, that's so perfect. And Simurgh was singing the whole flight.
Oh, no.
Sunny days, sweeping the clouds away.
No. All I could imagine was them singing the Aranara song for some reason, like
Vourukasha's like skipping on the way to Sumeru, like on the way to the Oasis.
Skipping or dying?
Both. Skipping to her death.
Skipping to death. That's what we do here in Teyvat. That's all you do. I mean, so many people are just willing to die in this game. I don't understand. Anyway, we will bring up a little bit the Forest of Dari, but like whatever, that's back in the forest. We are going to talk a little bit about the gods of the region, including a god not of this region, aka Egeria. And we'll talk a little bit more about them, of course, and we'll dive a little bit further into some of their lore. But a quick recap, you have King Deshret, the asshole who was obsessed with forbidden knowledge and eventually died, and then his body was fed to a pep, the original KFC meal.
The fate of fiends.
Yes, my fate, and eventually.
That's where Ahau got it from.
That's where Ahau gets all the evilness from. I mean, Ahau, I feel like Ahau would want to join me instead of Kanish, because when I get fed to a pep, he can take over my body from within a pep and then destroy a pep.
Yeah.
And then he'll really be king of the dragons,
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, don't tell him. Please keep it to yourselves. Don't let Ahau know. So then you have Nabu Malikata.
Goddess of flowers.
She also dies. She killed herself basically to prove a point to Deshret.
Well, we don't know. Yeah, it's a little gray of like what her true motives were and like what she actually did to herself.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little unclear.
Unclear to you guys. Not me.
He's headcanon.
If she didn't have a hand in it, she was okay with it.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Put it that way.
And also, I think it's important to remind everyone that Nabu Malikata, the goddess of flowers, was a survivor of the Seelie race. But she was somehow, she hadn't devolved into what we know as the Seelies. Not sure if that was a timing thing or if she was just a special Seelie. But she was a Seelie, aka a divine envoy to Celestia, who was exiled and thrown down to Teyvat. Like Feeny was saying, BFFs with Deshret and Rukkhadevata, or an throuple, if you choose to believe. And yeah, she decided at one point to help Deshret obtain that forbidden knowledge, but she also foresaw the Cataclysm because she had some timey-wimey powers. So she, decided to transfer at least some of, if not all of her Khvarena, which is, her light power, her light energy, over to the care of Rukkhadevata and sort of commanded it to wait until its fated sacrifice to save the world.
And Rukkhadevata becomes the Sumeru god, so it becomes the goddess of wisdom, the Hydro Archon, and Rukkhadevata, as we know, originally hung out in the desert, and then after Nabu's death, went over to the forest area, created the forest, became a god, blah, 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 blah. And when Rukkhadevata was gifted this power from Nabu, she actually took it and created Simurgh. And from there, Simurgh slept until, like Brandon said, the power was going to be, evoked.
Yeah, she crafted Nabu's light energy into a divine bird. And then the bird just kind of hung out with her in the forest until the Cataclysm happened.
Can't you imagine how cute that was?
Well, of course it was cute. They were putting on Sesame Street.
Yeah.
They were filming. I mean, how beautiful.
That's why Big Bird is yellow, because he's made of light.
Yeah, the light realm energy, man. Like, come on, get it straight.
I have a question. Do we think that Khvarena is the same thing as phlogiston in Natlan.
Oh, that's a great point, Brandon.
It's light energy. It's capable of counteracting abyssal energy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say no, just because the one thing with phlogiston is that we know it's pyro energy. And Khvarena is very clearly light energy, and it has nothing to do with Dendro. And it doesn't seem like the people of Sumeru can tap into it at all, where the people of Natlan can tap into phlogiston.
I know what you mean by, because they do say phlogiston is pyro.
Yeah.
Like a type of pyro. I'm going to theorize that phlogiston is the same as Khvarena, but when the first Pyro Archon created the rules or helped to create the rules of Natlan, that's sort of the form that the energy took. But I think it's at its essence the same thing. That's my theory. I could be wrong.
It's also curious though, because Khvarena comes up nowhere else in Sumeru. You know, like it's not like a widespread thing. It's only out in this area of the desert, as I like to call it, the third expansion pack of the desert.
Well, I like that idea. I feel like it's going to be more related to the Sealies because it came from Malikata. And since she was like, she did that whole trek basically where she was like dripping Ginny and all sorts of stuff.
The Oregon Trail.
Yeah, the Oregon Trail, where she was just sprouting Padisara flowers and stuff. It would be more divine than realm energy.
You're saying the Khvarena is more divine than the phlogiston.
That's my thought. Less to do with the earth than the sky.
Okay.
Nonetheless, a very interesting idea, Brandon.
Yeah.
It's interesting because the phlogiston also is like something that the dragons can like activate. And so the idea of like a divine bird being able to be made of all that power. And, you know, last week when we were talking about the little dragon friend we got and like the idea that elemental energy, when it happens, can either become a slime or very rarely does it become a being. The idea that maybe Khvarena is one of those unknown elements, because we know that there's at least one or two missing elements in Teyvat.
Well, so I'm not going to give any real spoilers, but in 5.1, they do kind of expand on what we know about phlogiston.
Okay.
So that's part of where my theory is coming from.
Okay.
But I don't want to get too into that because a lot of people haven't played it yet.
Yeah, and Travelers, you know, even if we've done it, we try not to talk too much about the most recent of like the Archon updates because we want to make sure we don't spoil anyone right off the bat. So yeah, we will be trying our best not to talk about anything.
I think it'll come back up by the next time we talk about Natlan and are ready to actually, whether it's the next time or the time after, whenever we're ready to talk about 5.1, this will definitely come back up in conversation. So we can revisit.
Yeah, definitely. But I like that point. So our last god that we need to talk about today is Egeria. And we will cover a little bit more about Egeria and everything with Egeria down the road, but we've never really talked about Egeria. So I think it's time to give you guys a quick little recap.
And it's very confusing.
Yes.
The history behind Egeria. I had to like go through it and I was like, oh, like even this time when I was researching it, I was like, oh, there was something that I didn't even realize from the last time that I reviewed it.
Yes, it always feels like it's changing because I think every time you read it, it's easier to understand. Like slowly you're like, oh, that makes more sense. And then you read it again, you're like, oh, fuck. Okay, yeah, sure.
And I think after finishing Fontaine helps that a little bit as well.
I think the most important thing before we even get into Egeria is just a reminder that when the original 7 sovereign dragons were in charge of Teyvat, one of them was considered the heart, quote unquote, of the primordial sea. And the primordial sea in Teyvat is where all life on Teyvat first originated. So the primordial sea has life-giving powers, and one of the 7 sovereigns was considered the beating heart of the sea and helped originate life on Teyvat. Then we get into the primordial one showing up, getting rid of all the dragons, and the primordial one's shade of life creates Egeria to become the new replacement heart of the sea. But what's really interesting and important to remember is that when the Primordial One's Shade of Life creates Egeria, Egeria is created from the raw resources that are already on Teyvat. And she is not a part of humanity, and she is not assigned any divine duties.
Yeah, which is like weird. It's a very weird situation.
Yeah. So she's not like a regular god. She's not like an Archon. She's not like an Urabashi type of situation. Those are beings created through the human realm, and Egeria was created of the raw resources that were already on Teyvat. So she was special. She was like a special god.
And so she was created to replace this heart, but she never really rose to any power. She never became an Archon. To be very truthful, I don't think the Archon War ever really hit Fontaine. They just eventually were like, all right. After the fall of Remuria, they're like, you could just take over. You should become this Archon.
So she gets created, right, by the Shade of Life. But then Egeria creates the Oceanids. And the legend is that she shed the first tear onto that, and that created the first Oceanid. And then from that Oceanid, all the other Oceanids were born. That's what, the legendary myth of how they were created.
Mm-hmm.
And so Egeria was also said to be like really gentle and like compassionate. And so she creates these Oceanids, and the Oceanids are like watching the humans run around on the surface of Teyvat, and they start to envy humans. And so Egeria feels bad as their creator. And so she uses the primordial sea to change their quote unquote blood vessels.
She injects their blood with roids, basically.
Yeah, humanity roids. She gives them humanity roids, and they're very dosed, and they become humans. And that, according to Celestia, was like the original sin of Fontaine. They did not like that. They swiftly imprisoned Egeria within the primordial sea. They were like, go to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200. And they lock her up in the primordial sea. They've cursed Fontaine, with the quote unquote prophecy of Fontaine. And so that's kind of where that's left until Remus, the God King, shows up.
So wait, just to pause you.
Mhm.
This sounds very much like, the Olympics, where like
Wait, where's Celine?
Celine. Too many people on the team were dosing, and so the whole team gets disqualified, and everyone looks down on them for like the next 10 years. That's Fontaine.
Yeah.
Celestia, that the Olympic, like, what are they, like the admins of the Olympics?
Yeah.
The heavenly principles is they're just there to judge the competition.
This is not cool.
You've been disqualified.
And it's funny because this year the Olympics were in Paris, so all of this makes so much sense.
It's all coming together.
And they started it out on the Seine, and they were afraid to go in that water, so it was primordial sea.
Yeah, because the Phytanians would be afraid to go in that shit too.
And Celine was just singing an old Remurian song.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. My Heart Will Go On becomes an old Remurian song.
So Remus shows up. He actually meets Egeria down in her prison, and he learns of the prophecy of Fontaine, the curse. And so he tries to save his people. And we'll get into that on a different episode. But ultimately he fails, and Remuria falls. After Remuria falls, allegedly because of humanity's desire for gods, but who knows the real reason, Egeria gets freed from her prison, and she is granted a quote unquote shard of the one who came before, or the one who came first, I think is how they say it. And she becomes the Hydro Archon. And I have a question about this.
Okay.
So the Wings of Merciful Wrathful Waters, which is a wind glider.
Can you say that once more?
The Wings of Merciful Wrathful Waters.
That was a lot.
And it is a lot for a wind glider, right?
It is.
So this wind glider's description says that Egeria was awarded a shard of that one who was first, and then gained, godhood. Like that's when she becomes a Hydro Archon and has like divine, duties that she has to fulfill. So I'm really confused about this because it almost sounds like the shard of the one who was first would be a gnosis, right? And that's why she becomes the Archon. But we know that the gnosis are made up of the remains of the third descender, not the first descender. So why would it be a shard of the, like, maybe it's not a gnosis? Like, I'm a little confused. Or is it just awkward phrasing?
I mean, I think it might be awkward phrasing because when I hear of a shard, and maybe it's just because I've been doing research for this episode, I think of like an elemental shard now.
Hmm.
So it's possible that the first could even be like a part of the sovereign, because I would think the sovereign is really the first who came. But you also referenced that the primordial one had its 4 shades, and that the one shade, which was the shade of life that doesn't have an official name, gave life to Egeria. So is it possible that there's a shard of the primordial one within Egeria?
Yeah, who's to say? Like it's a little confused.
It's like, how deep do you want it to be? You
It
know?
probably is awkward phrasing. I just thought that was strange because all of a sudden I was like, what if the primordial one is the one that's in the Gnosis?
Oh my God, stop.
But then
No.
why would they be the third descender instead of the first? You know what I mean? So
It's just their twin actually was the third descender. And then just
Ooh.
twins keep coming to this place. You've never met a twin in this game that we have, but yeah, the second one just fucked shit up. The second one was Don Hong. Because that's what I'd like.
But yeah, so she gets freed from her prison and she becomes the Hydro Archon, and then she slowly unites all of the scattered survivors from Remuria, the Remuria rule, because most of them are dead, but there are some survivors that are sort of like scattered as tribes around the area. So she gets all these lawless groups together, and that's kind of how she becomes the Archon of Justice and rules over Fontaine until, of course, the Cataclysm. And then, during the Cataclysm, she goes to Sumeru, where everyone is converging at the Tunigi Hollow, which is where this massive rift has been opened up and all these abyssal creatures are spilling out. And she dies there. And when she dies, she becomes the Amrita pool. I mean, I guess I should say she dies a little to the right of Tunigi Hollow.
Makes no sense, right?
Becomes the Amrita pool.
Well, she like went into a cave and died.
She like crawled into a hole and died, which makes sense.
Yeah, maybe
a
she was
little
wounded.
bit more.
She bled out and became a puddle.
Yeah, the wording is like that she was like slain. And I'm like, whoa.
She dies fighting in the Cataclysm, crawls into her cave, turns into a pool of water, which is called the Amrita pool. And then Rukkhadevata decides to grow a tree on top of her remains, which is called the Harvestokum tree. And she uses that tree to serve as an anchor for Egeria's divine consciousness, to anchor it to the mortal realm so that she can help to continually cleanse the abyssal corruption that keeps seeping into the area.
And she also, at this point, passes on all of her life problems to Focalors, the new Hydro Archon, in which case she's like, here you go. I might have made you a walking target for Celestia.
Yeah.
Good luck. Don't let these people touch the primordial sea.
Enjoy that prophecy.
Good luck with the flood.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings us to a timeline. And so we are going to talk about the world quests that happen out in this area, specifically the one with Sarush. But we think it's really important to lay the groundwork because otherwise everything's just really confusing.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with Rukkhadevata being gifted Simurgh. That is where our timeline begins. So before Nabu, the goddess of flowers, dies, she says, here's my light energy. Take my Khvarena. I keep calling it Khvarena.
Khvarena.
Khvarena, yeah.
Khvarena.
Yes, Khvarena. Take my Khvarena. It is yours now. Now, no one knows if Rukkhadevata knew what was going on, if Rukkhadevata knew what was going to happen to Nabu at this point. But Rukkhadevata takes it, converges the energy into one, and creates Simurgh, aka Big Bird. And Simurgh just goes to bed, like Venti.
Well, I think Simurgh hangs out in the forest.
I think they're just asleep like Venti.
You think they're just sleeping?
I honestly just read that they slept until they were called.
Oh, maybe. I think, maybe rested.
I would rather them be awake, to be honest.
Yeah, I just figured they were just hanging around, not doing anything.
Meanwhile, I'm like, it's literally Venti in a portal. Where did Venti go, guys? Where does he go when he sleeps? I don't know.
On a cloud.
Yeah, he's actually just sleeping on the table that the Hexen Circle meets at, and that's why they hate him.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's like a mystical area that we don't know about where the deities go to rest. It's the same place that Simurgh went to. I mean, I think it's called the Cave of Snuffleupagus.
I was going to say the only restful place Venti knows is Angel Share. He gets a good rest up there in the upstairs portion.
That makes sense, yeah.
Not the cat's tail. He dies there. So, years after Rukkhadevata is gifted Simurgh, the Cataclysm happens. And so there are two timelines going on during the Cataclysm that are going to be relevant for this story and for this area. And that is the story of what is happening at Tunigi Hollow and the Oasis. And that is also a smaller story of what's happening in the Forest of Dahri. So Khaenri'ah fucks shit up. We don't know exactly what happens.
We know that Khaenri'ah had some kind of facility underground. And at that facility, they found a way to connect themselves to other realms. And that is where this rift opens up at Tunigi Hollow. So they have a facility under Tunigi Hollow that connected them to other realms, and the Abyss was able to rip it open and create a giant rift that is sort of the entry point of all of these abyssal monsters flooding into Teyvat.
Yeah, or at least the main entry point, because we assume there might be more.
Sometimes I feel like the more I learn about Khaenri'ah, the more I understand why they got skynailed.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too because we keep blaming gold, but can you really imagine, and I want to blame gold for the Cataclysm, but can you really imagine gold in this facility with a lab coat on? She's not Urabashi, she's an alchemist. So it's very confusing too. It's how was this gold's fault?
Well, I think there might be two
golds,
different factions of Khaenri'ah.
Oh, thank God. I was not going to be happy.
No, 2 golds, no. I mean, maybe.
Don't say that.
She's out in the Sea of Quanta. I mean,
She's on the Astral Express.
She can stay there.
Oh, wow.
My theory is that there are 2 factions in Khaenri'ah. You have the 5 sinners, and then you have the Dane side.
Oh, interesting.
Because we see it where, Khaenri'ah has this horrible reputation, but then you have warriors from Khaenri'ah, like the Schwanenritter, who are actually fighting the Abyss in other areas. But
I also wanted to just say, Brandon, it's so funny that you bring that up because we always have this view of Khaenri'ah as well as being a land of knights and kings, and it feels very Roman, right? Even though we know it's whatever, what is it? It's supposed to be Nordic, right? But you get what I mean. It feels very Roman. But then you have this scientific lab, and it seems so out of character for Khaenri'ah as well. So it makes me wonder if there was some hidden stuff that a lot of people don't know about too. Why is this such an out of character area?
Well, they were very technologically advanced. Now, did they get some of that technology from the dragons? Who knows?
Maybe.
Yeah, they had to get it from somebody.
It wasn't me.
Well, thanks for clearing that one up.
I just in case people were worried, I'm not involved. I know there's a lot of rumors going around about me.
Alice just went to Best Buy and got a bunch of stuff and brought it back.
She's like, this looks fun, guys. What do you think? Everyone's like, no, Alice. But anyway, enough about Khaenri'ah for now. So they fuck shit up. This rift happens, and the Archons are called to Tunigi Hollow. Now, we know not everyone responded to this call. We know that Venti was busy fighting Durin. We know minimally the Makoto responded. We know that Egeria responded. And Rukkhadevata half responded. Because we know Rukkhadevata had to settle some stuff in Irminsul, but she is present in Tunigi Hollow for a bit and in the Oasis. So the first point that is really important is that Egeria dies. She is slain. We don't know exactly what happens to her. We know she crawls into a cave and she becomes the Amrita pool.
And then Ruka shows up and creates the magical tree on top of her remains.
Was Zhongli there?
Unknown because of his contracts. He won't tell us anything.
I was just wondering. I was like, wait, I don't remember hearing one way or the other. And when you listed them, I was like, poor little Zhongli left out.
Yeah, we don't know for sure where he was at. But, Brandon, you're a little early to the tree planting, I think. So the Amrita pool becomes a thing. And the pool was considered to be primordial water. And primordial water has this purifying element to it, which is also very interesting because of the Traveler having purifying elements. And you're like, I wonder what's going on there. But also, Khvarena also has a purifying capability to it as an elemental power. So there's a lot of questions there. But so this pool originally actually helps purify some of the abyssal corruption in the area. Then it starts to become also corrupted by the abyss. And that is when Rukkhadevata comes out of nowhere and summons Sumerg, because you can't form a tree and then dive into the water, right? So then Rukkhadevata summons Sumerg, the divine bird, big bird, been sleeping, been chilling in the forest, wakes up Sumerg, brings Sumerg to finally find their duty in life, their one purpose. And Sumerg, who was actually told that they had to drink from the water, but Sumerg deep dives into the water.
Mm-hmm.
Sumerg submerges into the
submerges, absolutely.
Dives into the Amrita pool, which totally purifies the water, but also shatters Sumerg into a ton of Khvarena shards. And some of these shards gain sentience, and I feel like sentience has become a theme of this season. We talked a lot about it last week in the Hizo episode, and we've talked about it with the summer event. But it gained the ones they were able to gain sentience become the Pari. And so while all of this destruction is happening, the Pari are born.
Mm-hmm.
There's creation coming from this destruction, which is kind of beautiful in a way. And this is when Rukkhadevata also emerges and plants, I'm going to say it wrong, the Harvestokum tree, which the Pari consider their god, by the way. They're like, yeah, tree.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, while all this crazy shit is going on in the desert, you have the Order of the Skeptics. And the Order of the Skeptics were originally a darshan. We don't know what the darshan was called. At least I couldn't find what it was originally called. They weren't the darshan of the Skeptics, but they were a darshan. And this darshan had found the Schwattenritter, which is Anfortis Alberi, and his crew of people. And a quick recap on Anfortis, him and his crew had brought people to the surface to fight the abyss from, I guess, the top down. So these were Khaenri'ahns who had actually, popped up and were fighting in Teyvat as opposed to the underground.
They were like an order of knights in Khaenri'ahn. Yeah, that came to the surface and were fighting against the monsters to try to keep them from overtaking everything. So they were valiant Khaenri'ahns.
And Anfortis had also given himself the title of in charge after King Ermin fell.
Yes, he was the regent. Yeah.
So these skeptics are inspired by the Schwattenritter, and they see them fighting and they decide that they're going to go help the cause and go fight at the heart of the issue. And they're actually able to follow these notes left behind by the Schwattenritter to go and find Tunigi Hollow, where they decide they're going to make their way out there and they're going to fight whatever they can, just like the Schwattenritter, and they're going to become cool people and they're going to save the world. And meanwhile, the tree has been created, Rukkhadevata dies, and Nahida is born somehow. I guess out of the little branch of Rukkhadevata, TBT to that. In the meantime, these Pari have been born, and you have the firstborn Pari of Zervan, who you do meet. Zervan is still alive and well. When Zervan awakes and is born, she says that all of Sumeru, except for the Oasis, was being totally engulfed by the abyss, which is very scary. And she actually finds Dainsleif in Tunigi Hollow.
Mm-hmm.
Which, what? This was the big, when you do the world quest, the big, what the fuck moment. And Zervan, somehow with her teeny tiny body, brings Dainsleif back to the Oasis over that giant mountain. And when Dainsleif is healed enough, the two of them go back and they decide to fight against the abyss. And there, they are joined by the skeptics. And they're able to eventually purify the abyss issue through a cleansing ceremony.
Yeah, so they're fighting off the abyss together. The Order of Skeptics, which is led by the one-armed sage Nagarjuna, they all go into a Khaenri'ahn ruin And they discovered like all the Schronenritter machines that were defending the area. But they also find some documents, and those documents help them to find the Vourukasha Oasis and the Amrita Pool and the Harvest Stokum. They actually figure out a way to do a cleansing and seals off the abyss, cleanses the area, and it also causes the Pari to start continually being birthed to just have this like continuous fight against the abyss to like whittle the abyss down until they have, actual control of the region again.
Which gross. Continual birth.
Well, they just started popping
They're just
up.
like little light particles. They're just like cute little light particles
Gross.
exploding
They're
into the air.
adorable.
Gross.
They bond with humans, which is probably a little bit more gross. So they basically have like these little friendships with like almost like their purpose in life. They have to have like their own human being, which made me think, did Dainsleif have a Pari?
Ooh. Well, maybe it was Zervan.
Oh, yeah, because they would have bonded.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it was our abyss sibling. Just saying. Anyway.
For the longest time, I swore that the one-armed man, though, when I was doing this quest, was actually our sibling. And I was like, wait a second. I missed the whole, where'd the arm go? He grew it back like the swamp thing.
I would have been playing as Ether, like I have a brother. What? But Dane eventually does leave that area, like after the rift has been sealed by, the skeptics and the Pari and Dane like triggering this cleansing thing.
Mm-hmm.
The rift gets sealed up. The area calms down with all the Pari combating the corruption of the abyss. And then when everything settles, Dane actually leaves the Oasis area with our sibling, while the one-armed sage Nagarjuna, the leader of the skeptics, he goes into a Khaenri'ahn ruin and never returns. And then the rest of his Darshan, and the surviving humans of that area, they start commingling with the Pari, and they actually form the Order of Skeptics at that time. Before it was just a Darshan, we've been calling it Skeptics, but it was actually just a Darshan from Sumeru City. And then as they start commingling with the Pari and spinning, grand tales about Nagarjuna's heroism, that's when the Order of Skeptics becomes more of like a religion instead of just a Darshan.
And they break away from the Akademiya.
Yeah.
And as we know, that's when people go crazy.
Yeah. They formed a cult.
Yes. And before we dive into a little bit of the troubles that cult ends up encountering, which is the next piece of our timeline, I just wanted to take a pause to talk a little bit about what a Pari is. So we did mention that the Pari is made of Khvarena, but they are like this avian creature that can fly. They are created from the shards from Simurgh,
mixed with Egeria's Amrita pool remains.
And so they see not only the tree that's there as a god, but they also consider Egeria to be their god because of that.
Now think about it though. So they are from Egeria and Malikata, basically. And they look like flowery oceanids.
Oh yeah, it's perfect.
And they look bird-like because Rukkhadevata turned Nabu's energy into a bird.
Mm-hmm. They have little wingies. They're adorable.
They're sassy as fuck.
They are sassy.
If there's one thing that this game has given us, it's two sassy as fuck floating things that we get to keep with us. And that is Lillipar and Sarush.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Sumeru does like their floating sass.
Yeah, and what is Kaveh suitcase called? It's not sassy, but like I feel like it gives side eye sometimes.
You got a How, you got Paimon.
Oh, a How. Oh, I love that he keeps coming up. Anyway, so every Pari ends up being born with like this specific purpose, and they feel like they have to do this thing on their own. Like they have to accomplish it. They can't get anyone's help unless it's a Yasnapadi. And a Yasnapadi.
What'd you call me?
A Yasnapadi, because technically the Traveler is Sarush's Yasnapadi. So a Yasnapadi is a human that the Pari bond with. So what Tiff was talking about earlier. It's almost like a familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Pari finish their requirements and they fulfill their purpose, they die, basically.
They die.
They die. Which is like, how sad to find your purpose and then you die. And meanwhile, Zervan's been around for like 500 plus years.
Yeah.
No purpose over there.
She got no purpose.
Maybe her purpose is just to lead.
Yeah. Her purpose is to live.
So when a Pari accomplishes this purpose and they die, they either become a plume of purifying light or they become a Fravashi tree. So the plume of purifying light are those little like yellowy things that you had to collect and then bring back to the pool in order to level up your pool and get rewardies. And the Fravashi trees are those like green circular half moon trees that like you go up to them as Sarush in the game and you end up being given like a puzzle or like a side quest and you do it quickly and then you can also release them. Because the whole thing is like when a Pari dies, their plume of purifying light has to be returned to the Amrita pool. And if for some reason when they can't be returned, they turn into this tree and then their Napadi, aka their human familiar, is responsible for bringing them back from the tree form and doing this puzzle and then bringing them back to the pool. It's a lot.
The trees basically bloom the plumes of purifying light on them, right?
Yes.
And then you collect those and whisk them off to the pool.
Mm-hmm.
Drop the kids off at the pool, if you will.
Oh my god.
That's why it's called Yasna Potty, because they got a potty.
Because it's a potty. There's always something about poop in
It's
Sumeru.
Sumeru. You got to bring in the Duke.
Mm-hmm.
Where's Nahida? So yes, so just a little, snippet on the Pari. So the Pari continue to exist after all of this happened. They continue to protect the Oasis and do what they need to do alongside the Skeptics. The Skeptics, meanwhile, continue to vibe out as well, hang out with the Pari. Their belief is the transmission of knowledge at all costs. And they also believe that conflict is part of natural order here in Teyvat, which it's a lot. So like Brandon mentioned, their OG leader disappeared during the Cataclysm after going into a Khaenri'ahn ruin. And for a very long time, the rest of them just kind of kept their own records of what was going on with the Skeptics, kept up with the Pari. And one day, the Akademiya sends like a research group out and they want to go and investigate the Khaenri'ahn ruins. And the leader at the time is 100% against this, thinks it's a terrible idea, but the Akademiya people keep pushing back. So they decide to send Klingsor down with them. Now, Klingsor, who is a member of the Order of the Skeptics, is actually an original descendant of Hadora, who is a member of the Schwartenritter. So he's actually Khaenri'ahn. And Klingsor really holds himself in high regard because he's Khaenri'ahn. He kind of like has a chip on his shoulder about it, which is interesting because at the time we actually learned that there was a lot of like negative associations for the Khaenri'ahns. They were looked down on. It was kind of like, ugh, you caused this shit, as everyone was trying to rebuild. So he ends up going down with them and leading them down this hole. And at one point they're getting further and some people are starting to second guess it and they're getting scared. And the leader of the Akademiya group is like, no, we're going to keep going. And so they keep going down. And as they're going down further, Klingsor starts to hear what is described as gospel buzzing in his ears. And he ends up disappearing on this group, which makes the leader of the Akademiya group think that he's like defecting against them and that he's abandoning them and that he's going to like try to do something bad. Meanwhile, this whole group ends up like dying and disappearing. So while this group is dying and disappearing, Klingsor is being totally brought into the juju of the abyss. And he actually turns into an abyssal monster, aka an abyss lector. He becomes a blue abyss lector. And this happens after he also finds Renee's investigation notes. Do we remember fucking Renee?
Oh, yeah.
Renee Petrichor.
Yeah, because they were hanging out over in the desert for quite some time.
Yeah, it was what? Renee, Jacob, and Carl?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they found out that Renee and Jacob both kind of had the same energy as the Oasis, but Carl didn't. Poor Carl turned to goop. That's why he turned to goop. Because he didn't have the same bodily function. I don't know. Bodily composition. So Klingsor ends up becoming an Abyss Lector, and he ends up leading the Abyss Order and a ton of abyssal monsters on an attack on the Vourukasha Oasis. And their whole goal is to obtain something called the Great Song of Khvarena. Now, this song is something that contains quote unquote immense power, but it's said that only the Pari can actually like use it. through some sort of ritual and stuff like that. So I don't know why he thought he was going to be able to do this, but he did. And his goal with getting the Great Song would be to use it to reverse the Rite of Chinvat, which is this ritual that Dainsleif did years ago with Zervan to protect the area from the Abyss coming in. And Zervan actually leads the rest of the skeptics in to stop him. But in the process of stopping him and the Abyss, a fire is started, and it actually destroys all of the records about the skeptics and about their history, because they were actually really good at like maintaining a written record of what was going on, and they lose a lot of their own history. And when you talk to Zervan later on in the game, she says that the Order never truly recovered from this incident.
That allowed them to become a little bit more loony bins, because now they didn't have records to kind of solidify some of the things. I feel like it kind of gave them where they were factual before, all of a sudden they became more grandiose in what was going on and what had gone on.
More cult-like.
Yeah. And so there's one more important piece of timeline history that comes into play in this area. At least it's important to me prior to us jumping into the world quest. And it's that 20 years prior to the game starting, Have's father actually goes out and joins a research project in their investigation of this area, because he thinks that whatever he's going to find over in this area is going to help Aru village. So he goes out there with the goal of trying to find the Order of the Skeptics, but we never really hear anything else about it. So we don't know if he ever found the skeptics. We don't know if Kave's father ever heard the truth that he needed to hear. We're not sure what happens with that.
Did he come back?
Well, we know Kave's father dies in the desert, right?
Do we know that was during that trip, or just
we don't know. Right? I
think he does.
He on this trip is the one that he dies in. I mean, 20 years ago would make sense given Kave's age.
Yeah, I think so. He hears something from someone that disillusions him and depresses him, and then he starts looking for the Order of Skeptics for some reason. So I think from what I read, it made it sound almost like whatever he found out that made him really sad led him to search for the Order of Skeptics. And I don't know. I guess I don't know for sure if it was during that trip to try to find them that he died, but it was sometime around then, I believe.
But we also know that on that trip, his goal was to help Aru village in some way too.
Right.
So I don't know if he was depressed because of something going on in Aru village. Maybe people had convinced him that, the area was going to die off. I don't know. Just another fun little fact that ties into Kave's very sad story. I hope that Kave does not try to find the Order of the Skeptics anytime soon, because they're a mess nowadays. So that leads us to today in Teyvat, or whenever you played this in Teyvat. This came out quite a bit ago. But the Traveler and Paimon make their way out to the desert, where they run into the new leader of the skeptics.
And heaven forbid they make his name very far away from the original guy, because I swore he was the same person.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Nasajuna versus Nagarjuna.
Yeah, way too similar. But almost feels faded in a way.
Yeah.
I think we meet Sarush first, right?
Oh, do we? Okay, sorry.
And then Sarush takes us to Nasajuna.
So, Sarush, what were your first thoughts on Sarush? After dealing with Lillipar already at this point.
Yeah, you're kind of worried where this is going, but I don't know. I feel obviously there was sass, there was some befuddlement.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't really seem to know what she was trying to do, which continues on as we meet other Pari too, where they're like, yeah, sure, she don't know nothing.
I just hoped that there was going to be no more incest. That was my fear.
Yeah, and luckily there's not that we know of.
Is it luckily?
I mean...
Is it sad? No.
Have you been changed as a person from the Lillipar story? Now you just expect it? Wait, there's no incest?
I just think that Lillipar was such a good person, and I really feel bad for her. So I was just hoping that Saru should be another person I feel bad for.
The incest would do it?
I'm sensing a little sarcasm.
That's a little sorry, a lot of sarcasm. No, I liked Sarush in the end a lot more than I think I like Lillipar, but still don't really like either of them. Sarush at least is sassy with a purpose.
Yeah. Sarush is a diva,
Yeah.
but like a campy diva because she doesn't really understand like how silly she seems to us.
Because she's just got her purpose. That's all she knows.
But she talks to us like we're her, she assigns us the role of Yasnapati and like just kind of talks down to us, like acts like we exist solely for her purpose.
I mean, everybody else treats us like that. Everybody else is like, just do our shit for us.
Traveler is definitely a power bottom. Just like, yeah, I'll do whatever you tell me to.
They're the Yasnapati for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the Yasnapati bottom.
Yeah. The Yasna bottom.
Yasna power bottom. Yeah.
But yeah, so we meet Sarush, and Sarush brings us over to meet Nazahuna.
I say Nazajuna. I don't know if that's right.
I say Nazajuna too, but
I'm saying it in the Spanish way. Now leave me alone.
I don't
you
think
totally
it's
did. It was
Spanish.
Nazajuna.
wonderful.
And we're out here because of Catherine, right? Everything is because of Catherine.
Yeah, we find a drum in the desert and we end up talking to Catherine and she's like, oh yeah, this is a commission that has something to do with the Cataclysm. And it has something to do with this thing called the Sign of Aposha.
Stop it. Not her being like, I got some Cataclysm gas for you.
Yeah.
You want to go do it?
Something that happened 500 years ago.
Have you heard of it? Do you know of it?
Tempting. I love it how we're giving her so much personality when in reality
Yeah.
she would be like, this thing that happened 500 years ago.
No. The heat is in her again. That's all.
Do you think there's somebody like feeding though to Catherine, like give this one to the traveler? They need to learn this stuff.
Well, we all know that people think that the puppeteer Harbinger controls her. So is it Sandrone?
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh.
That's like all everyone is like very assuming that because she has these puppeteer vibes, and we know that Catherine is a Shniznayan bot,
Mhm.
that she's actually in control of Catherine, which is like, oh, so is Shniznaya actually in all of control of the Adventurers Guild?
It makes sense. It's like how they can spy on all the different regions.
And so
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised though if they're purposely giving us stuff, and this whole time this Saritsa is making us do her bidding, basically. But we just feel like we're out there doing the good, doing the good fight. And we're like, sure,
Mhm.
we'll do that. But yeah, anyway, Catherine aside, lots of things could be said with Catherine. We've accepted the commission. We run into Sarush, and then she immediately tells us her, like, what her prophecy of her life is and how she's here to stop the sign of Aposha.
Mhm.
And she's like, you know what? By the way, you're mine now, bitch. Congrats on being my Yasnapati. And that's when she takes us to meet Nazajuna, who is now the leader of the Order of Skeptics. And he explains to us what the Aposha is.
Mhm. Which is super confusing.
Yeah, I'm still a little confused. It's like a mirror.
Yeah, so he explains that the Sign of Aposha, which in the game, the Sign of Aposha is like this purple abyssal energy coming out of a hole in the sky. And it's meeting, the beam of it is shooting downward, while this green energy is coming up from not the ground, but like a lower point in the sky, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And it's shooting upward, and the beams of them are like meeting in the middle and kind of fighting each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is happening over by the Vourukasha Oasis, where the
Yeah.
actual sign is.
It's happening like right over the tree.
Yeah.
Right over the Harvest Oakum tree, right? So he explains that this sign of Aposha is a reflection of the abyss corruption overtaking the land around it. And he says that it's like a reflection in water. So like you're seeing image being reflected in water. So it's like it's not the real thing that's happening. You're just seeing it being reflected back at you, but you also can't see what's behind it. So the way that I kind of understood it is that the sky is reflecting an image that is actually happening in the abyss.
Terrifying.
So like this abyssal energy fighting whatever the green energy is, this is actually happening in the abyss, but it's being reflected in our sky somehow.
Yeah, because we're like, if we went through this pool, we wouldn't be in the abyss. We end up in Tunigi Hollow.
Yeah, it's connected to the rift, the abyssal rift in Tunigi Hollow. It's almost like the rift is reflecting something that's happening in the abyss in our sky. That's how I understood it.
And these are our two like projection monitors that we're watching it on.
Yeah, which makes sense when we know the sky isn't real. So apparently above the Harvest Totem, it's like
it's real there.
It's a two-way mirror.
I know it feels like you're in like Hazo's detective agency, and like they're like interrogating us on one side.
Yeah, he clarifies that monsters cannot enter through the sign of Aposha, but that it still corrupts the area around it. Because again, it's not the real rift. The rift is Tunigi Hollow, but the sign, this reflected sign of Aposha, is happening above the Vourukasha Oasis, where the Amrita Pool / Harvest Totem tree is.
It's very confusing.
Yeah, it seems like it could have been just next to each other.
I think all you really need to know if this is confusing is that the abyss is like seeping in and trying to corrupt the Harvest Totem tree and the Amrita Pool and the Vourukasha Oasis. So I'm just going to call that all the Oasis. The abyssal energy is like corrupting that area via reflection somehow. And it just means that Sarush knows that her destiny is to sacrifice, or she thinks is to sacrifice herself to stop the sign of Aposha from spreading any corruption to the Oasis.
Which we're kind of like, all right, no one's got to die today. Like, maybe we could figure this out, bro.
She's like, no, it is my destiny. I will end my life saving the world.
And that's, again, when Traveler writes in her little diary, find a therapist in Teyvat. Like a running list of like, if I ever find this therapy group that's somewhere, I'm gonna make them good money, and I better get like a 5% referral fee. Like,
I mean, Traveler's gonna need some therapy after all this too.
Traveler's gonna die. It's fine.
Oh my.
Wow. Anyway, Brendan, continue.
It's funny because someone in our Discord server the other day was saying how they think when we get to Snezhnaya, that child is going to die. And it made me think of you immediately. I was like, I don't want him to die. Alt account of Phoenix? No. My conspiracy theory. Everyone has an alt account. So we find out that the sign of Aposha is causing this abyssal corruption, and that to cleanse it, we have to do that rite of Shinvat, which was used before in the past. But to do that rite, we have to use the great songs of Khvarena. So we have to get the songs of Khvarena, and that's Sarush's goal. But before she can do that, she must obtain the twin horn chaplet from Zervan,
which will make her the Bloom Guard. And Zervan denies giving her the challenge.
Yeah. She's like, you can't have this hat.
This is where people are like having PTSD from the Aranara questline, because before we can do this, it's like, I have to do this right. But to do the right, I need this twin horn chaplet. But before I can get the twin horn chaplet, I have to go find these other two Pari and become a Bloom Guard. So it's like, you got to do this in order to do this in order to do this. It's like very layered.
And all in the end, you just become sad. That's the no matter what it is, you're gonna be sad. Yeah, so we have to go fight, or I don't remember if it's fighting, but we have to go save these two Pari.
Yeah, which we do. And then we collect the first song of Khvarena, and then we go visit Nasajuna, who for some reason has the locations of the other 4 songs, because there's 5 of them. And we get one of them on our own. Then we have to go to Nasajuna to find out where the other 4 are. Zervan, of course, is suspicious of Nasajuna for having any knowledge of where the other songs are, because Zervan is like, only the Pari should know where these are. So I don't understand why he knows.
Yeah, because he's not my familiar.
Right. He ain't my Yasnapati. And Nasajuna explains to us that he learned their locations from a scholar's documents that contained, all these long lost traditions from the Order of Skeptics. So like, I guess the cult manual. So we jump through the hoops, we collect 3 more of the songs until all that's left is 1 more.
And quick question, these songs are the drums, right? Like they have something to do with more drums.
Yeah, drums are involved.
That was such a weird thing.
It was very confusing.
Yeah, like you have to play the drums in a certain way to get the stuff,
Yes.
but it like opened up like a puzzle on the wall type of thing.
It's very ritual, like strange ritual thing happening. And it's also just weird that you're like collecting songs that like, what is it, just the music? Is it like an artifact? It's just weird. All I know is you're collecting the 5 songs and you get 4 of them. And then Nasajuna says, okay, let's go get the last one together. And guess what? It's in a Khaenri'ahn factory.
Ugh.
So we go to this Khaenri'ahn factory to get the last one. Nasajuna is acting very suspicious, but we're like, it's fine. We'll worry about it later.
Yeah, basically. Like we can handle it. He's just a human.
I'm not worried. Of course, he does reveal himself to be a traitor. And he explains that the sign of Aposha is, this reflection of reality outside the skies of Teyvat, and that he wants to use these 5 great songs to unleash the sign of Aposha into the real world. So basically, he wants the Abyss to invade Teyvat again.
We love it.
And then he summons his BFF, Klingzor.
Damn it. Him again.
And so we fight Klingzor while Nasajuna escapes. You know what's really a fun fact about Klingzor? Like you said, Feeny, he's a descendant of Hadura, who was in the Schwanenritter. And fun fact, Hadura, even though he did fight against the monsters of the Abyss during the Cataclysm with the Schwanenritters, he ultimately betrays Anfortas by sabotaging some of the machinery, and Anfortas killed him. So it's interesting that Klingzor is like a descendant of someone who was also a traitor.
Oh, yeah, it just runs in the family.
Yeah.
Once a traitor, they all become traitors. And am I right or am I right?
I mean, it makes me wonder if that's part of the reason that he was swayed over to the Abyss, We fight Klingzor, beat him, Nasajuna escapes.
Beat him. Ooh, with a bat?
With the bat.
A baseball bat.
Beat that boy with
that
the
bitch
bat.
with the bat.
Smack.
We go back to Zervan, and she's like, oh, yeah, I know that guy. Klingzor.
I had a feeling.
So annoying. So we do our cleansing of the area that opens up this path to the Harvest Totem. We go to the top of this Harvest Totem tree. And while we're there, Sarush starts having this vision of the past and sees the Pari fighting along 2 Khaenri'ahn warriors during the Cataclysm. And she says, I see a masked sword wielder and a one-armed sage. So we know that she's like having visions of Dainsleif and Nagarjuna. We keep doing our thing. We open a path to the Khvarena, which is this lotus at the center of the Harvest Totem tree. And I don't know about y'all, but I just think of the Macarena when I see it. Just like, dale tu puerta la alegría Khvarena. Like, I'm just imagining, Sarush with her little wings, like doing the Macarena in a trance.
In a trance. And we're just watching, like, hello.
It's very complicated. I feel like they made a lot of the mechanics of all this stuff like way overly complicated and abstract. But yeah, so there's this lotus at the center of the Harvest Totem tree, and that is somehow involved in whatever rite Sarush performs that awakens Egeria's consciousness. So I guess Egeria's consciousness, it's there, it's anchored to the mortal realm by the tree, but I guess it sort of hibernates till we wake it up. And that's sort of what dispels all the filth from the area again. So we do that. Everything gets cleansed. And after that, the sign of Aposha is gone. And the Harvest Totem stump that was there before is now a big magical tree in bloom.
And you're like, what the fuck?
And it's just, you can see it from like miles
Everywhere.
and miles away. Yeah.
Fontaine, Natlan, Mondstadt, Dragonspine, you name it, you could see it.
Yeah, it's pretty spectacular. That's when Zervan tells us all about the Cataclysm, like encountering Dainsleif, Nagarjuna arriving with the Darshan and all of that stuff.
Was it or was it not disappointing to all you that we learned more from Zervan than we did Zhongli?
Yes.
I mean, Zervan doesn't have a contract.
Yeah, but you know what? Zhongli swears he's my friend. Like, you know what I mean? It's just so frustrating.
Well, I think it's really interesting because the Pari are made of this elemental raw energy from the light realm that mixed with the primordial sea, which was there as well. Like they're made out of things that predate the human realm and the stuff that was created by the primordial one and Celestia. So I think it's kind of clever to do it that way, where we know that like the archons are sort of limited in what they're able to tell us because they have to follow all these rules.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're more of a reliable narrator at this point too than any of the archons. You know, everyone's always like, I'm so suspicious of Venti and Zhongli, but no one's like, I'm suspicious of Zervan and Lillipar.
Yeah.
Well, Lillipar definitely.
Well, we're not suspicious of her. She's pretty open. She's like, you know,
we
like,
find out real quick that she's crazy.
She's like very similar to Enjo. I totally betrayed them. I totally caused incest.
It's kind of funny. We do trust that Lillipar tells us the truth, even though her whole truth is like all about how much she deceived everyone in the past.
Yeah. We're like, but you're telling us the truth now,
I deceived
right?
this person and this person and this person.
But you know, like everyone has like that one crazy friend that like you bring them to a group outing, right? And it's the first time they've maybe met one or two of those people. And they're telling all these crazy stories and you're not questioning any of it. You know it must all be true. And then you go home and one of the new friends texts you and is like, hey, like Tiff was telling all these crazy stories. Did you actually believe that shit? And I'm like, oh yeah, 100%. Like I just like I know what they're saying is factual. That's Lillipar. Like it's just some of it is just such audacity that like how could you not believe, like why would you lie about causing incest?
Yeah. Why would you lie about fating your family to die?
And she's pretty open about the fact that all of this shit got her fucked over. You know, like so
yeah.
Even though she doesn't think she was wrong, she is willing to say, I was punished. Like, here I am being punished for it all.
I got mad once, and this is what happened.
All I did was try to get vengeance for all the wrongdoings, and for some reason, I got turned into this bottle.
Just because it lasted a few generations.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just because, like, a lot of people died, I was like, whatever.
I brought down cities. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I might have brought down cities, but I also birthed multiple cities worth of people.
Yeah.
So what does it matter?
She's like, you know, I know a lot of people have a problem with my vengeance, but I like to think of my vengeance as being like all the children that I killed along the way.
The journeys, the friends we made along the way. But for Lillipar, the journeys, the people we killed along the way.
The children that
My children I killed along the way.
I made them, I took them back.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, and that's basically the end of the world quest. There is a ton of stuff that you can continue to do in Tunigi Hollow and in the Oasis. It's really up to you. There's different Pari you can help. One thing that I think is really interesting about the Oasis specifically is that there are these flowers that you can like do puzzles with, basically. In the Oasis, it said that the Pari guard the Sea of Flowers. And the Sea of Flowers are those like flower puzzles. That's what they consider the Sea of Flowers. And those flowers actually react to light energies and things like that. And that's why you can only solve the puzzles with them when you're a Pari. But I think the whole like Sea of Flowers thing is interesting because they talk about flowers with our sibling, like the whole thing of like the siblings first started their journey. And I don't know if they call it a Sea of Flowers, but in like a bed of flowers. And if you rewatch the Teyvat trailer, it talks a little bit about how much Lumine loved these flowers because of course it's going with the canon that Lumine is the Abyss twin. And at the end, Dainsleif is like, will you fight me? Will you prove that you are more capable of saving her than I am? And then it kind of goes black and he says something like, remembering how much she loved these flowers too. And I was like, I wonder if this is the bed of flowers that they're talking about. Not necessarily saying that the flowers physically look the same. We know that things like that could be swayed and changed. But is it possible that we were actually separated from our sibling in this area? I don't know.
I'm trying to think back to the Pari Bear Part 2 quest. Because doesn't it show the flowers? And aren't they, am I making this up or were they in Teyvat? The flowers from Khaenri'ahn?
I don't know if they were in Teyvat or if they were in Kari Bear's dream sequence thing.
When we are doing the chasm Dainsleif, we see the flowers too.
We see one flower and we touch it and have a flashback.
Mhm.
And that was like kind of, it seems, purposely left behind by our sibling.
And they're called Intevats, right?
I believe so.
Like just like Tevat with IN in front of it. So creative, such a creative name.
But the reason I bring up these flowers is because I have a theory. So I was curious if it's possible that either the traveler or the traveler's sibling is actually a shard of Khvarena that gains sentient but turn into a human or a human-like creature. And that's why I was kind of joking earlier. Maybe it was a joke about the traveler or the traveler's sibling perhaps being the Pari that Dainsleif was connected to.
Mhm.
We know our sibling is not a descender. And whether or not that is because something is fucked up in Irminsul or they're actually not a descender, we don't know. We also know, thanks to Kari Bear, that the Luma Fate can put memories in my head and that it can make me believe things that I didn't once think were there. We also know from the Teyvat trailer that our quote-unquote journey starts in this bed of flowers, sea of flowers, whatever they call it in the trailer, and that it's supposed to end there too. And that's when we're going to fight Dainsleif and prove ourselves. And Dainsleif does talk a little bit about weaving time in the trailer. So my theory is that our sibling is actually a Pari or a shard of Khvarena, and that we are possibly in this endless cycle and we are trying to fix something, solve something, weave through time, and that when we are able to fix it all and save it, that this shard of light either becomes free or if we're the shard of light, maybe we merge with our sibling. I'm not really sure where the end goal in that is, but it would make sense. We know that Khvarena can purify abyssal corruption. We know that the Traveler can purify abyssal corruption. And I don't know if our sibling could, so maybe there's more of a push toward the Traveler is Khvarena. Although that wouldn't make as much sense since we're quote-unquote a descender, unless, again, someone fucked with Irminsul and switched us. We don't know for certain. So, I don't know. It's just like, something's up with us and our sibling. There's something going on.
I could see that. Like maybe when we descended in our human form, we somehow ended up, like maybe we landed in a big puddle of Khvarena.
It's possible.
And that sort of fused with us and created our twin based sort of on our body, but gaining sentience being a part of the ley lines because they were created into that by us mixing with the raw energy of the light realm that was already into that and runs through the ley lines. So yeah, I think it makes sense. I think it's a valid theory. And that when our twin was created, the ley lines created a bunch of false memories of them.
Like when we met the Heavenly Principles and they put us in a box.
I honestly think while we were like cooking in that box, that's actually when all these false memories were created. And I truly think it was the Luma Fate, because even though we know the Luma Fate only got launched more recently, it didn't launch when we first were like in Mondstadt and everything. The Luma Fate could have put shit in our heads from way back then. And we're just automatically assuming that that's what we've been seeing the whole game and everything's been a lie.
Yeah.
Have either of you seen or watched playthroughs of Kingdom Hearts or Kingdom Hearts 2?
No.
So in Kingdom Hearts 1, Sora, the main character, and I'm gonna butcher this, so Kingdom Hearts fans, please be kind to me. It's been a while. But he basically gets locked in this like box, and his heart gets like divided, because that's like the whole thing, is your heart is the most important thing in your life in Kingdom Hearts. But it's like more so like your metaphorical heart, but they do use the physical heart. And his heart gets split and he gets this like second person created out of him named Roxas. And Roxas is originally kind of like this hollow being, and he joins like this evil organization, but he ends up gaining more of a sentience, more of a personality, and he goes and he lives off on his own and he makes friends and he lives like this joyous life. And that's because of this character Naminé. She's like this blonde chick, and she actually like creates memories for both of them, and she can draw and like make them see things and believe things. And that's how I kind of feel this like is happening in this like game right now. Is like the Traveler was put in a box and was fed all these like dreams and memories and whatnot, and none of it's true. And I don't know. I mean, Venti acts like they've met us before. Things could be false. We don't know.
That is very true. That is still one of those weird little things that kind of sticks with you. Venti's like, oh, you don't remember that? Okay, well, never mind.
And the Traveler is keeping things from us, you know? Like, we don't necessarily have a reliable narrator in the Traveler because we don't know everything that the Traveler knows. Like, every now and then the Traveler would be like, yeah, I remember doing that. And we're like, you do? What are you talking about? Like, why haven't we ever heard about this before? So we're playing as an unreliable narrator to begin with as well. And that doesn't really help. So I don't know. That's just my like big theory and thought. And I thought this whole like Sea of Flowers thing was like, and the fact that Dainsleif does run into our sibling over in this area, but we really don't know how they meet or like anything like that.
Yeah, and I mean that would definitely give some sort of semblance to why our sibling is over there.
Yeah,
because it is just like they popped out. That's why I think for a bit I thought they were the one-armed sage, because I was like, well, that makes sense.
Or like even like thinking they're the warrior at first, and then Zurvan is like, nah, that was Dainsleif, and you're like, oh fuck, that could have been my sibling, but it's not.
But it's that other dude. No, it's interesting. It's definitely, you definitely have some valid points in there. It'll be interesting to see how that really plays out in the end.
We all get the vibe that there's some kind of weird thing like that that's going to happen.
We just don't know what yet, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
But whatever. I also wanted to bring up, there's a lot of different cultural references brought up in this area. I want to just talk a little bit about the idea of a div. So, you know, we've heard of divs in the game a little bit, and mostly in the manga, but a div is supposed to be like the evil monsters that Archon residue can come off of. So like the negative power that creates like this black fire powers and whatever. So in different Middle Eastern cultures, a div, spelled a little differently, div, is a monstrous creature. And it's described as having a body that's kind of human. It's really big, got 2 horns on their head, has teeth and tusks like a boar. They're powerful, they're cold-blooded, and they really just want to taste human blood. A little vampire-y. This isn't Buffy though, so whatever. And so there's this history of a angelic Zoroastrian divine person called Sarush. And this Sarush is actually the first king of the Kyumars. And he has a son who is actually a Peri, which is basically a Pari, but in like a different cultural reference. And he tries to warn the group about these evil spirits. And they end up entering into a war against someone else's army of divs. So I'm really keeping this minimal because I don't want to fuck up the cultural references here. But I thought that was really interesting because we have a little bit of information about divs, and it sounds like Sarush, not necessarily Sarush, but the other Pari, fought against some crazy monsters and abyssal monsters nonetheless. But also the description of a div in, you know, Middle Eastern culture and lore sounds a lot like Barnabas in the manga, the creature that he turns into.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm curious if they're actually going to tie this in somehow to Endgame, where Sarush is going to help us fight against maybe some characters like Barnabas who have been experimented on with the Archon residue, aka the div residue, in a sense.
Well, do you mean like just another world quest?
No, I mean like Endgame.
Well, they better voice her.
Yeah.
They better force us to meet her in the Archon quest, or people are going to be like, who the hell is that?
That's true. And that's really I have so many questions about that because Sarush didn't die. So we all think that Sarush just finished their purpose, but she didn't die. So did she really reach her purpose? And just looking into the cultural references and knowing that Hoyo likes to half-assedly pull from cultural references, I know I can't actually predict the future based on cultural references here because they never follow through with half of them. But it does make me wonder if Sarush's true purpose is going to have to be maybe purifying the Oasis again during Endgame. And that she's going to come into play.
Yeah, that would be a nice callback if they did do that.
Or even like, if like say we're fighting somewhere and we get like a really awesome cutscene, so showing the Pari and Zarush having to do that all over again here. Because it does feel like we're gonna get like something like a Cataclysm in the end. If we do get another Cataclysm event like that, it would be nice to see the people fighting the good fights just like they did 500 years ago. So to see, the people fighting again in the Oasis, to see maybe Venti and Dvalin having to fight something in Mondstadt, like it'd be really cool to see those flashovers. Or even if they're memories, the Traveler loves a good memory to help give them power. So it'd be cool if, like, while we're fighting whatever we're doing, we see these flashes of our friends fighting and doing their thing. I don't know. I'm doing a lot of speculation right now.
I like that idea, but I think the story would be better if Sarush has the moment and is like, at last, I am going to fulfill my destiny and sacrifice myself to save blah, blah, blah. But then at the very last moment, Zervan does it. And save Sarush. I think that would be better.
And Zervan like breaks almost like the curse of the Pari having to die as soon as they do their purpose.
Yeah.
And it's a curse, but yeah.
Just a fun thought that entered my mind. I don't actually believe it or anything. I just think it's something that I thought fleetingly about, which might be interesting for some people to ponder.
Ooh.
Is when I was looking back at this, I was like, could it make sense for Nabu, the goddess of flowers, to actually be the shade of life? My theory is that she's just a divine envoy / Seelie that worked closely with the shade of life. But I think it's fun to just ask, like, well, what if she was the shade of life?
I mean, wouldn't that suggest that the primordial one was a Seelie?
Not necessarily, because the shades, could be of the primordial one, but not like the primordial one could have created the shades.
I guess I always assumed that a shade meant that like they had like a piece of the primordial one within them. But I guess like I could be a Seelie that is given that shard. It's like implanted into me type of thing. Kind of like, I know, where's Al when you need her, man? Kind of like in Inuyasha, like when they have this thing called the Sacred Jewel, and it breaks off into like a million pieces. And like the whole goal of Inuyasha at the beginning is that you're supposed to go collect these pieces. And people literally just like put the shards, like they shove them into like their epidermis, like the top layer of their skin.
Ugh.
And then they get this power. So that's kind of like how I'm imagining these shards right now. Like the shards of the primordial one that's giving these shades their power. But that, I actually like that idea.
So I don't think that she is. I just think it's fun to question it. But my theory is that Nabu was just a regular divine envoy, but that worked closely or was somehow tied to the shade of life. And I say that because her powers seem very creation based. Like if you think about when she comes down after she's exiled and she's like walking through the sands and like there are like pools of water coming from her that bloom into these flowers that create the djinn. Like she creates a whole species of like elemental spirits on Teyvat.
Yeah.
So she definitely has a lot of like creation vibes going on. And then obviously she has all this Khvarena energy that is used to create the Pari.
Yeah, and create a bird.
Yeah. But while I was thinking that, I was like, I had to ask myself, what if she was the shade of life? That would be a trip. But I think it makes more sense that she's just a Seelie that was somehow associated with the shade of life.
Yeah, because if she was the shade of life too, I would think that Nabu would have had more interaction with Egeria before her death.
That's part of why I wondered it, because we know that the shade of life created Egeria.
Right. But you think that they would have maybe kept in contact or something? I don't know. Unless Nabu is the shade of life and foresaw the cataclysm and was like, I'm going to stay away from Egeria and let them die.
But it's interesting because Nabu, in theory, foresaw the need for her Khvarena to mix with Egeria's essence.
Yeah, like she knew it was happening or was going to happen. And she was like, peace out. I don't want to stick around for this.
She's like, I guess I have to give this to Ruki now because this has to happen.
Since I'm going to end myself to help Deshre.
Yeah, since I'm going to help the love of my life right now. She's the opposite of a woman scorned. Unless she was we joked that she was a woman scorned though, right? Didn't we say that she could have possibly been like, you know what? I could help you, but fuck you.
I like that side of it.
She's around somewhere. I don't know where, but she's here. I believe that Nabu is somewhere. I do. I don't know where she is. I think she's alive and
Not in
well.
her little garden.
No, she's alive and well, hiding right in plain sight.
That'd be interesting.
I think she could very well be just in a different form. Like she could just be like a consciousness somewhere.
Yeah, whether she was reborn or she just stayed the same, I think she's out there, and I think she knows who she is regardless. And she's just sitting like in her like kitchen, eating a cookie, giggling.
Oh God.
She's hanging out in that empty chair.
Yeah. She's like, look, it's my chair. Nobody comes here anymore. I'll just sit here.
No, we were there. She would have had to have been. She would have been like, "Fuck, they're invading my privacy."
Yeah. She went and hid.
She's actually in Lilipar's bottle that we carry like after Lilipar left. She took up shop in that bottle.
Or maybe Zervan is actually Nabu, and that's why she stuck around for so long.
Oh, that'd be cool.
I was going to ask you guys who your favorite Pari was out of all the ones that we met.
Oh, I like the sleepy one.
Me too. I love the sleepy one. Rashnu. She's just like, sleeping's a duty also.
And she's like, didn't she like break the instruments or something outside of her where she was? Because she's like, people kept playing all this music. It was waking me up.
Yep.
Like, I'm trying to sleep in here. Do you know what time it is? They're like, you've been asleep for years.
Yeah.
Shut up. Get off my lawn.
She's also one of the ones that had to be saved by Surge as well. Beans, do you have even if it's just by color?
No. I knew exactly who I was. I like Jar Jar. The yellow one that keeps like setting up all the fucking quests for Sarush to do. And Jar Jar who's like secretly trying to like fuck Sarush over. It's so ridiculous. And also like they think Jar Jar might be a reference to Jar Jar Binks.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I that's a win to me. Star Wars. And she's cute. She kind of reminds me of Kaveh with her little like feathery red thing. But you know, I'm probably biased. That's actually Jar Jar is Kaveh's father.
Oh my God.
Rashnu would have been the one that I would have said, but I'll go with Mahir because she was the other one who needed to be saved, but she is a lot of sass. She's very busy working. She doesn't have time for any of our shit. She's the olive one that has kind of like this like crown of thorns. She is just like, wait, Sarush did what? Like she pulled this off? Like, really? We talking about the same girl here?
Sarush scares me because she looks like Scar, but with heterochromia.
With her little horned caplet.
It's like a crown of thorns. It's very scary. She's very intimidating. On that note, I do think that's all the time we have today to talk about the Pari and Pari Land. I think we have to move on to our Kirara mail section right now. Kirara just handed me 2 letters and then sassily walked away, and I'm pretty sure she smacked me with her tail, but it's fine. She's still a little mad about last week when I threatened to tell Hazel the truth. So our first message comes from Travo this week, and they said, all right, I have a theory. Remember a few months back during the Arataki Blazing Armor Beetle Battle Brawl event?
What was that?
The Arataki Blazing Armor Beetle Battle Brawl event.
That was different from the other one?
No, it's not the iridescent Arataki Rockin' for Life Tour de Force of Awesomeness event.
Oh.
It's the Arataki Blazing Armor Beetle Battle Brawl event. Brawl,
really
not bra.
I mean, Ito might like a bra event.
I feel like he would be like singing in a concert and someone would throw a bra at him and he'd be like, ah! So Brawl, Beetle Battles, where we got introduced to the Geova shop called Crystal Tornado. I miss Crystal Tornado.
Yeah, me too.
What if that Geofa shop in particular was the former pet of Clorind? Hear me out. Unless they said what happened to her pet in her story, what if he got too wild and rowdy for Clorind to handle, and that she had no choice but to release him back into the wild where its species originated from, aka Leeway, which explains why this Geova shop seems to have more intelligence than the rest of his brethren. And according to Zhongli in the cutscene from the event, she said that it stays on his little island and attacks anyone who enters it. What if he's pulling a Hachiko and staying on that island because that's where Clorind left him, and that he's waiting for her to come back and attack anyone who isn't her?
Can I tell you, when I read this, I got like teary-eyed. I was like, oh, it's Chico. Just waiting for his friend to return. That was so sad.
Yeah, I think this is a great theory
hmm
because we don't know what happened to that Geo Bishop from Khvaren's past, do we?
Not that I know of.
No, I don't think so.
So yeah, and we know that it's from Liyue, so it would make total sense.
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
all
that's so
about it.
sad. I mean, Khvaren's asshole master like probably just dropped it off back in Liyue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
like
without
Corinne
warning.
doesn't even know where it is, type of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe we should tell her.
Yeah. Like, hey, we met this shop that you might like. They might know you.
I know. That'd be cool if like in the future Ito shows up in Fontaine and has a moment with her and like brings it up. That'd be so cool. And then Claren was like, wait, what?
hmm Yeah, I love this.
Ooh, maybe it'll bring Corinne to Liyue even in like a fun little crossover event.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Maybe in another Beetle Battle event.
No.
Yeah, what if she's like looking for it? I mean, it feels like after her story quest, she's kind of like actually grappling with some of the fucked up stuff that happened to her in her past, you know?
Yeah.
So I could see her like I could see Navia sort of dragging her.
Let's go on a trip.
We're doing therapy by travel.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because they did go to Liyue at one point during Lantern Rite. We saw them in Chenyu Vale.
For some reason, I don't think of that as Leo.
No, it does feel like a different area completely. But maybe like that's just the start of their traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Travo, great question. You formed a lot of emotions. Speaking about Hachiko. Thank you. Our next message comes from Allie, and they said, I love it when the Khaenri'ahn curse is brought up in any lore talk, but I still don't fully understand what's going on with Danes. If he's a pure blood Khaenri'ahn, why did Zervan find him half transformed into a monster? And how were they able to rehabilitate him? I didn't think the curse could be reversed.
So I have a possible explanation for this.
I'm ready.
So I was actually saved it talking about it until we got to this question. When Zervan finds Dane over at Tunigi Hollow and he's like conked out or whatever, and you know, she drags him over to the Oasis to heal him, he's actually clutching a ring.
Ah, the ring from Lord of the Rings.
hmm
That's what, of course, it makes me think of that because I just keep seeing, I watched The Rings of Power, so now I just see Lord of the Rings references everywhere.
Or was it the ring he was going to propose to Lu Min with?
Ooh,
Oh.
well, maybe. But, you know, yeah, Zervan does mention that half of his body was monstrous, but that, you know, she makes it a point to say that he was holding this ring in his hand. So it makes me think, wait, does he have a ring in his images? Is he wearing a ring?
He's always just making a fist. Like he's Arthur. Well, also, who's to say that he's going to wear a ring on his hands?
Right, maybe he has a chain. It's like a necklace or something. Maybe it's up his butthole, like that one thing he hid.
Oh, God.
The ring in his ring. So unless Dainsleif has a ring hidden under one of his gloves
Or on a chain.
or on a chain around his neck, maybe, it doesn't seem like he's wearing one, you know, at least on the outside of his gloves. So where is this ring, first of all? But second of all, you know, I think it's valid to theorize that that's what is saving him from the more severe effects of the curse. I think maybe whatever this ring is, I don't know who he got it from, where it came from, but it seems like that might be what kept him from changing all the way and like preserved half of him at least.
And we also know that Zervan took Dainsleif from Tunigi Hollow to the Oasis and waited for him to like heal up before going into battle with him. And we know that the Pari are made out of Khvarena, which we know can cure abyssal corruption to a point. So there's also a possibility that Zervan might have healed him, and we don't know that, to get him to the point he's at today.
Yeah.
He might not look as monstrous because of Zervan.
Right.
And we learned with Atea when we talked about Natlan that while Traveler was able to help rid her of some of the abyssal stuff, she couldn't, like, the other stuff was too far down.
Mm-hmm.
So assuming that he was just infected or corrupted with it, there is better chance that he could have been somewhat saved. But he does wear the gloves, and he has that little half mask thing going on too for a purpose.
it's definitely possible that Zervan healed him a little bit, and that like what we see today is like the abyssal corruption that was too far deep that we could not reverse. So I don't know.
Also, an interesting thing about Dane is his character card that I guess was released by Hoyo at some point in the past. It actually shows like his constellation as translating to Snake Ring constellation. So that's interesting.
I hate that there's not a lot of info about him out there. He's such like an important character and we know like nothing.
Oh,
it
yeah,
better be spectacular when we find out more.
It won't be.
No.
They like to like reveal little by little. I mean, last time we saw Dainsleif, he got his ass kicked by our sibling and we never got to see him again.
Well, in my mind, he was sliced open like a freaking fricassee. Like,
that's why they made it sound like he didn't want to see us in that condition. Oh my God, maybe
he was splayed.
Hear me out. He loses an arm and becomes the one-armed sage.
Oh, and then I was right.
We are truly in a full circle moment. Dainsleif will be one-armed when we see him again.
Then I can just say I had a premonition.
Well, no, you thought that the traveler sibling was one-armed.
Well, yeah.
This I said Dainsleif.
Yeah.
But we'll give it to you, Tip, anyway. But anyway, thank you, Allie, for the question. I do think that's all the time we have for today. Travelers, if you liked this episode or you have some unfavorable opinions about it, you can feel free to email us. Let us know what you think at talesoftevatpod@gmail.com. Additionally, you can give us a follow on Instagram, Tales of Teyvat Pod, or on Twitter, Tales of Teyvat. Please feel free to give us a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts to give other travelers a notion that, hey, maybe they'll have a cool time over here. Lastly, please feel free to buy us a cup of coffee on Ko-fi, where we take any money we get from that and we put it directly into paying for our editing softwares, paying for our web URLs, and all that fun jazz that comes into making this podcast. And maybe, just maybe, we'll actually buy a cup of coffee with it as well. That being said, next week we are going to be talking about the one reincarnated dragon we get to talk to on a regular basis, Monsieur Nouvelette. Until then, safe journeys, travelers. We'll see you next time.
Bye, Sesame Street nerds.
Can I be Elmo?
How to get to Amrita Street.